Hello there. I hope I am live. Welcome everybody. And my name is Anna Maria, and thank you for participating in this live stream. Um, Today we're going to speak about a particular play, Hamlet, and I'm going to first introduce myself and the company I run. My name is Corradini, and I am an actor, writer, script writer, playwright, also write music. And I set up this company, Corradini Teatro, in 2017, and which has now taken another name, and I'll explain about that. A new brand, which is Blue Arrow Theatre. Today we have a guest, a special guest, a person who's been working a lot with the company in the last 2 years. And but before I introduce this guest, for the people who never met me before, don't know anything about what I do or what this company does, just a few words introducing this company and also introducing this channel, this YouTube channel. I'm very active on YouTube. I must say it's the only social media I really use. I love YouTube. I love the platform. I rarely appear on YouTube as myself, but usually in the disguise of another character, impersonating, being an actor, somebody else. And this time I'm focusing my attention on this channel as well. It's a third channel I created, and the reason being that, as we'll explain once we have my guest on board. As a company, we were doing too much after the end of COVID, which was really something really bad for the theater industry in particular, which kind of resembles what happened to Shakespeare when I speak about that. And in case you didn't know that, during Shakespeare's time, the plague was a big issue, and the theaters in the UK had to close for 2 years. So basically, I can identify very much with this story. So what happened is our work really literally exploded. And when I say exploded, not only in quantity, but especially in the logistics. So with our shows, we were, during the last 2 seasons, present in Vietnam, South Korea, Australia, Italy, of course, France, Germany, China, and India. And this created a lot of stress and also a lot of confusion. So it was just like impossible in a way to define really what we were doing. And the theater shows in English really took a life of their own. But without any further ado, speaking about the channel, speaking about Hamlet, today is a special day in the UK. It's Shakespeare's Day. I got our guest with me, Nike Redding, and here he comes. Hello, Nike.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So this is the first live stream. Something about this channel for the people who will watch maybe this recording later on. It's very important that you like and subscribe if you like the content that we provide, because the way the platform is devised, YouTube, it really opens up all sort of possibilities once you reach 1,000 subscribers. And the way it is right now, for example, this live stream cannot be attended by more than 25 people because we are underneath the threshold of 1,000 subscribers. So let me put this logo up for a second and subscribe and like, okay, right below your face, Nike. All right, Nike. So I explained maybe in a confusing way what we do, what I do. It doesn't matter. I think spontaneity is the key. And why don't you introduce yourself for a second, and then we just carry on with this conversation.
Yeah, so my name is Nike Redding. I'm an American, but I've been living in Italy now for almost 9 years. So I first came to Italy to live in Arezzo to study physical theater. And that path has taken me in lots of crazy adventures. I met Tom, what was it, the November 2021, I think. So COVID was kind of in full swing at that time. And it's been a great collaboration ever since.
It's nice how we met, because basically you came to see a show in Turin. And as a company, we're based near the city of Turin in northern Italy, and basically we had a chat for 20 seconds, and I asked you, would you like to work on our show? At the time, the show was Brexit, which is one of the many shows I did write, and then basically that was the biggest mistake of your life, I guess.
No, it helped me out a lot. I mean,
All right.
I think for everybody, but if it's possible to say, especially for actors, people working in the arts, COVID was a tough time. So
Yeah.
it was really a
And
destined
so,
meeting.
yeah, now we going to make this tight. I mean, I want to end the streaming, if possible, not to make it more than an hour long or 50 minutes or whatever. So we got a lot to talk about. And the first thing, speaking about Shakespeare and COVID, there's a relationship there because, as I said, during Shakespeare's time, the plague was a big issue. Maybe many people maybe don't know it, but it was literally impossible to build a theater within a radius of 7 miles around the center of London because it was so dangerous. And theaters were opening up and closing and opening up and closing until when, for 2 years, they actually had to remain shut down. And we don't know what happened to Shakespeare in that time. There's lots of theories out there. Some people even say that he went to Italy. But yeah, so what I'm saying is what happened to the living performances during COVID is not so different from what happened during Shakespeare's time. But still, people were making theater. So I guess that makes you, Nike, and I, I guess spiritual warriors in a way, despite the difficulties, we carry on like crazy. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, I digressed for a second. Now, we're going to speak about Hamlet, but let me first, you spoke about Arezzo, this great school. Do you want to name the school, by the way? I think we can promote it.
Yeah, it's Accademia dell'Arte.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Nice little school still going around.
So I personally study at the Atelier Teatro Fisico Filippo Radice, which is a physical theater school. And in the show I write, and we do, when I say we, there's lots of people, of course, behind the show, technicians, other actors that I write for other people, are very, very physical. They're not shows that are devised in a way for students specifically studying English as a second language. So what happened is, because they're so physical and because communication goes beyond the simple prose of the words, they're just very easy to understand spontaneously, and also they're very transferable in a way from one language to the other. So accidentally, and this is something that happened, spontaneously in a way. They work in other languages as well. So we got some shows there that exist in an Italian version and in an English version as well. As a matter of fact, Nike, you are involved in one of them, which is Mr. Jackpot. Okay, which is a show about gambling addiction. Tell you what, because it's so visual, and I'm gonna start with a provocation. Okay, right away. And the provocation is this one: why should young people go see theater? Why is it important? I don't know, because it seems to me that the so-called Generation Z is not involved that much, both in theater, I would say both in music as well, but they're very much involved in video games, for example, and that could be a reason, in a society where devices are all over. I got my mobile phone with me, and it seems that playing something live on the stage is kind of second class, uninteresting, whatever. But I'll let you meditate on the answer, and meanwhile, let me show you a video, and so that would be.
Is your 6-month relationship with your slot machine strapping you for cash? Did you need some easy money? Have I got the app for you? DebtBooster.com will allow you to go into debt with style. All you have to do is download the app, go to debtbooster.com, download it, and click start.
Okay, that's a show where you're involved. So I will not get into this show because we're speaking about something else right now. But it's a show about gambling addiction, and really, what we do as a company, we're specializing in comedy, like I said, physical theater, and but there's always a social theme underneath. So in this case, it's gambling addiction. We We have 3 silent comedy shows. That is to say, they're not spoken, modern clowning, and one of them it's about mental illnesses. Another one it's about the Lehman Brothers, the start of the financial crisis in 2008. Another one it's about the connection between Zen and spirituality. So there's always something underneath. And this show, which is Hamlet, unfortunately, I don't have any video about this show because it's fairly new. It's the first show where we actually tackle Shakespeare. Now, it is not the real Hamlet, but it takes Hamlet as an inspiration, okay? And I've spoken too much already. Maybe you want to tell the story, Nike, and then, but remember the question is, why should students come and see live shows? I mean, they're completely useless in a way. But let us speak about the show. You explain the show to me, because maybe you can explain it better than I can.
Okay. Well, so the situation of the show is there are 2 actors that are preparing to perform Hamlet, the actor playing Hamlet and his understudy. So the person who's sort of training for the role, preparing in case something goes wrong. The understudy is always there, ready. But the car that is bringing the rest of the crew and the props and the other actors gets into an accident. And so the 2 actors that are there already have to ask themselves to do or not to do. No?
Yeah, so that's the Shakespeare question. That's exactly great. Of course, we will say what happens at the end. There's a threatening boss lurking in the background, like waiting for Godot. This person is like... is a terrifying presence that kind of pushes the 2 actors who actually do the show. But what's your take? So one thing which actually, I'll go back to the first question. The question is, why should people watch live theater? And it seems like a rhetorical question. Probably an actor would be tempted to say, well, theater is important, and explain why it is important, and so on and so forth. But really, I think whenever I speak to students about Hamlet, you see this face of of heaviness in a way. It is not something like oh, this is going to be very, very boring. That's what I sense. Okay. And I think we wanted to make this very, very light, because in the story of Hamlet nowadays, I think there is a level of depth which can be very educational for young people. I mean, it is a story about a young man that goes through all sort of destructive emotions, so to speak. And I think because we had COVID as well, and of course a lot of people went through depression or anxiety or whatever, you name it. The fact of in a light manner, I know it's contradictory, using comedy, but to also navigate through the series of destructive emotions, I think it can be useful in a way. I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yeah, one thing I will say is that it's very difficult to translate Shakespeare, because to an English speaker already his language is antique. But if a native speaker enters it and allows themselves to open their ears towards it, the poetry comes out and it becomes incredibly vibrant and alive. And it's not at all a dead language when the poetry is allowed to really exist like that. So I think it's very difficult to work with a translation of Shakespeare, because maybe you're getting the content, but the story itself is not that interesting, perhaps. Shakespeare was always working with stories that the people generally knew, so it wasn't that they were going like today. Maybe we say no spoilers because we don't want to ruin the show by knowing what happens. Instead, in those days, they knew what was going to happen, but it was very invigorating the way that it was told. So this is a kind of a priori sort of thing to take into mind. So it's a big challenge, of course, working with Hamlet and working with Shakespeare in general. So I think definitely needs to be opened in a very generous way if we want to, well, I want to convey to students today what my experience was, which was, I mean, my heart was opened by Hamlet. I felt
Okay,
no,
that's a story. That's a story I'm going to ask you about later on.
yeah,
But yeah, so that's one take, and one take. It's the one of course, the father Shakespeare in a way. It's the father of the English language. It's the equivalent of Molière for the French, or Goethe. You speak about German, or Dante Alighieri for speaking about the Divine Comedy. So there is this sort of sacred aura around Shakespeare. Of course, that's effective for native speakers. For people who are not native speakers, maybe they don't feel that kind of connection. But I think if you speak about Hamlet, also the story per se, is just very interesting. Now, let me remind you, to the people watching, Hamlet, Prince of Sweden. This is the title of the play I'm taking around with Hamlet, and with this Hamlet, sorry, with Nike, because he plays Hamlet in the play, so I got confused for a second. But of course, it's not Prince of Sweden; it should be Prince of Denmark. But basically, it's a comedy, and like I said, you explained what the setup is. But still, in the story of Hamlet, I think there's a touch of modernity, just because we're speaking about a young person who really goes this voyage through all these destructive emotions. We got revenge, we got depression, we got even I could say suicidal tendencies, to be or not to
I
be.
mean, in fact, that's my point. Is it's very I don't even want to say modern. It's very universal.
It's very modern. No, you can say. I think it's very, very modern.
Is something that touches us, but we have to break through the walls and the barriers. This kind of automatic response of Shakespeare, because it's really a pity.
Yeah, and just to give you an example, I mean, my experience with this was so good that I got a spoiler here. Probably for the next theater season, I'm going to write yet another play, which is going to be based on the story of Romeo and Juliet, but it would be based in today's Shanghai. And the title of the play, I always work with title myself, is going to be Shanghai Burning. I don't know why, but usually I must envision a title and a poster in order to carry out, to write, commit to a story, so to speak. All right, yeah. So you touch a fact that, in Shakespeare's time, people pretty much knew what these stories were about. And of course, we're speaking about an age where there wasn't any copyright, for example. And Bernard Shaw used to tell about Shakespeare that he was the greatest storyteller of all times, as long as somebody had written a story before him, because all of his stories were not original. But he kind of snatched them out there. Probably he could speak Italian as well, because as far as we know, for a couple of stories he wrote, there wasn't any English translation out there. So he must have certainly spoken Italian. And also he wrote a lot of plays, based in Italy. I think I may be mistaken here, but something like, so certainly more of the plays he wrote about Scotland, for example. So I don't want to say a number because I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm not an expert on Shakespeare at all. But you are, speaking about Hamlet, because your connection with Hamlet, and that's one of the reasons we started to write this play together, and goes back from a long time. You actually did the old play, the original play. So maybe you want to
with some colleagues in Arezzo, we put together an hour version of the play, so still very, very reduced, but we started with the ambition of telling the story, the whole story, as much as we could within an hour. So we did have to take away a lot of the characters, a lot of the process that we went through in editing. There are some scenes in Hamlet, Prince of Sweden that kind of echo this, what we actually went through doing that. And yeah, it became a good success. Our focus was to bring out the comic elements, bring out the physical elements, as as I kind of mentioned before, to break through these barriers that students might have approaching Shakespeare. So I think it is a masterpiece. So it's something that, if it can be presented in the right way, it's a life-changing story. It's a life-changing experience to see that story told. But it has to be doctored. It has to be presented in such a way that it is accessible and not full of barriers.
Right. Yes, I'm appearing on the
Oh,
opposite
Salman,
side
can you-
now. I'm playing with this, so let me see if I can do this. Yeah. Okay. That's better right now. Sorry. Yeah. So, what really attracts, in a way, what really attracts me is not the play itself, Hamlet, but the life story of William Shakespeare. I mean, we speak about times, like I said, the lifespan was very short. If I'm not mistaken, the average life in some neighborhoods of London was like 25-year-old. People die very young. And he was very lucky because, and I speak about Shakespeare when I said it, he was very lucky because he happened to live for quite a long time compared to the average age of the time. Marlowe, for example, was like one of his direct competitors. He died extremely young, if I'm not mistaken, in his 20s during a fight. He was knifed in the head or something like that. And also, we really, this year I wrote 4 plays, which is kind of amazing for me. But really, the life story of Shakespeare was inspirational because you gotta understand that people were going to these theaters. There wasn't only the Globe; there was a whole series of companies out there. Like people are. Well, I'll be tempted to say like people are watching movies today, but today nobody watches movies in theaters any longer. They just stay home. But anyway, it was the only thing you could do. I mean, there was no radio, no TV, or so on. So attendance was very high, and not only that, but theaters were displaying maybe 2 shows a day, and they would change every day. Some of the actors had to learn 15 different plays, 15 to be performed in the same week. So when I read about that, I was like flabbergasted. I said, "Oh my God!" So these people really worked very, 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 very hard, and yeah. So the determination, the fact that despite anything bad that could happen, around you, and it wasn't only the plague. I mean, there were all sort of illnesses out there during those times. You could die for a toothache. I mean, life was very fragile, but still there was a dream, and I think theater was a chance to dream about something, probably to get away, a form of escapism, so to speak. All right, so that's what really attracted me, and the fact that we use this gimmick, this story where these 2 actors really have to confront this huge problem of having to put the whole play by themselves, just the 2 of them, without any help, and the fact that they're going to do it shows that kind of a determination. So that's what I found very modern in this story. Okay, especially in an age where everything's so easy, and that you want to buy something. Okay, you just order it on Amazon. Soon in the future, will be brought to you by drones. I think they're experimenting with that as well. You want to watch a movie, or I get my mobile phone, I can watch, whatever it is, 4K. So everything's so easy nowadays. But in those days, everything had to be very, very, very difficult. But I think it just built character. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I mean, going back to maybe your first question makes me think, I think today it's easy to associate theater with cinema, and therefore also theater just with entertainment. But it's also, and so it must have this level of entertainment to hold us there, but it has also some other really important aspects that cinema doesn't have, or I mean, let's say as AI continues to become a dominant aspect in our lives, right now it's just bubbling up, but the more that we are detached from what we can see and feel and people in front of us, I think the more important this presence of a real person in front of you, and so the actors, but also the people around you. So there's a level of theater that is about the community and the social part. of
I
coming
think
together.
you're spot on 100%. We usually disagree, but on this, I must say I agree completely. And what we're seeing now, what I was told by some teachers, for example, and also by a guy working at university, it's not only high schools; it goes up to the university level. Is that during the break, when there is the recession, the break, students don't speak to each other any longer. They just spend their time on their devices, and the fact that this guy working at university, I had this conversation with this person last week, told me that it's the same story at university, that so we speak about people from their 13 14 years old to their 20 plus or whatever. It really shows something. I mean, we're becoming an isolated atomic beings in a way, without any real connection with other people, and that's very dangerous. I think all of us are living in our own bubble, and like you said, a theater is a moment where we can stay together and have, at a spiritual level, an exchange of energy, so to speak. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Let me just show a video. Sorry, I'm just digressing for a second. This is not very well prepared, but even better. I think spontaneity is the key. But I'll show you a video of once again what we mean by physical theater, and I'll show you something that has nothing to do with Shakespeare at all. All right. But it's just a particular style, the kind of theater we do. So here it comes.
George. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a press conference of Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers, it's a new bank. The American investment bank Lehman Brothers has filed for bankruptcy in New York. That's happened in the last.
All right. So sorry, that was, but that's this show, for example, doesn't use any words whatsoever. It's a pure physical comedy show. But like I said, there's always a theme underneath. In this case, it's a financial crisis of 2008. Now with Shakespeare, for me, writing this with you, okay, it was kind of a challenge, because I mean, we're speaking about something which is heavily leaning towards prose, of course. I mean, it is literature, and it is great literature. So for me, it was kind of scary in a way, because I come from another background. It's clowning and stuff like that. So I must say, it always looked to me like, my goodness, Shakespeare. I mean, something really, 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 really heavy. And I must say, your contribution was fantastic, because you kind of helped me out. You helped me out to take it easy and absorb it very slowly. And that's my take. So
yeah. I mean, it's poetry has this kind of reputation as being something untouchable. No, it's far away, but instead, it should be the opposite. It should be something that is right on top of us, more so than how we normally speak. It should be a way of speaking that goes directly to the emotions, rather than sort of using our typical way of speaking, which goes around it and looks for the best way. Instead, it's direct.
You're touching a universal point there, which I think applies certainly to Italian in Italy, and I would imagine it applies to other countries as well. What I'm saying is, because of the way we use technology, people are changing also in the way they speak. For example, we use less words, and we're less eloquent. Sorry, I think that's a word. I've seen some surveys taken, for example, in Italy. We're based in Italy as a company, and in the surveys, people were analyzing how comedians used to speak in the past, say in the 1950s or 60s or whatever, and the way they speak today. And the number of words used has just decreased dramatically. And I wonder whether the simplification of life, in a way, as you're using words, I'm not saying that you got to speak, in a very rhetorical way and using difficult words and so on, but whether oversimplifying life in a way brings some problems with it. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know if you agree with me. And it was great for me to go back. I think we had a big discussion about one word, which is contumely. Do you remember that?
Yeah, of course.
I don't think any British probably knows what the word contumely means, as any other Shakespearean words. But that's the beauty of it, I think.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
It's in the To Be or Not to Be monologue, but the 1 hour version I had done before, we cut that line out. So it was one of the words that came up in this new version of Hamlet, Prince of Sweden that I had no idea what it meant, but it has a Latin root. So you knew it anyway, right?
Yeah. Right now, as I'm broadcasting this, I'm in the island of Cyprus, and for 2 years during COVID, it's a personal story, but it's related to Shakespeare. I studied modern Greek in order to get out of a quasi depression. I mean, it was very hard, and in order to keep myself occupied, I started studying modern Greek, which is a beautiful language, if you ask me, related to Shakespeare as well, because of course, the actual spelling in English of all the Greek words, it's identical to the Greek spelling. Not too many people know that, but yeah, so it was great. Okay, so we're 32 minutes into the stream. I don't know if anybody's following. If you want to ask a question, you can ask a question live now. Meanwhile, before we continue, we're going to end up in 15 minutes. So we're going to keep it nice and tight. I'm just going to show you very fast how you can reach us. So it's info at tomcorradini.it, and you can also WhatsApp the company at +39 393 8030 864. And don't forget to like and subscribe, just because it's going to help us a lot. All right, maybe we're digressing here. I don't care. And I would like to speak right now about women. And because the only drawback of the play we put on board was the fact that, of course, we are two male actors, and I know about the other half of the word is women, and but at the same time, I said to myself, well, this is going to be realistic as well, because in Shakespeare's time, women were not allowed to play on the stage. If you've seen the movie Shakespeare in Love, it's the inciting event is actually the fact that.
In fact, it was one of the innovations of Commedia dell'arte to start using.
Are you serious? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's not only a male story; it's a female story. And how do you see the figure of Ophelia, for example, yourself?
Well, I was actually speaking about this really recently, because Hamlet has very harsh words for Ophelia, which we actually kept this little dialogue in there. He says, God gave you one face, and you make yourselves another. So he's saying, look at you women, you put on makeup and you hide yourselves, you jig, you amble, you lisp. He doesn't have a lot of kind words to say about Ophelia, at least after Act 1. And I was reflecting that, for Hamlet, he is in a critical moment where he sees enemies all around him. He doesn't know anymore who was working with his uncle to kill his father, but he suspects everyone. And he begins by trusting Ophelia, but then it turns out that she was working with her father, or rather her father had manipulated her to spy on their private conversations. So after that, for Hamlet, it's just, you see, I told you so. You women are not trustworthy. And so he has this this pain that I think is motivated by his fear and by his desire to stand up and do something. This is kind of the whole conflict of the play, is that he needs to go and kill his uncle, but it's not easy to act in such a direct manner.
All right, let me just adjust this for a second. Yeah, because I always appear on the opposite side. I'm learning how to use this, but that's all right. Yeah, and also I think the relationship with the mother is very important. You told me there's a movie, there's a famous movie, but I forgot the title, that actually was inspired by Hamlet. What's the title of the movie? It's a Viking story.
The Northman.
The Northman.
Yeah.
So
nice story.
We got
less contemplative, perhaps.
a conflictual relationship with the female part, so to speak. And
exactly.
It's kind of funny, because I'm right here on the island of Cyprus right now, which kind of reminds me of Othello, and and the old story of murders carried out because of jealousy. Another very conflictual relationship as far as the female main relationship is concerned. Okay.
But one thing we could reflect on in terms of understanding these characters and why do they act the way they do, is that in that time, it was, let's say, the historical case that women were more dependent than they are today. And so it would have been very difficult for Ophelia to stand up to Polonius, or for Gertrude to stand up to Claudius. And Hamlet sees this as in a very negative way, and develops a kind of hatred for this. I think he's projecting his own fear onto them, would be my kind of little mini psychological analysis, that he is terrified of doing this thing that he has to do. So everyone else who is also in a situation that is difficult for them, he projects his own self-hatred onto them. And so he starts to yell at his mother, to yell at Ophelia. And it's, I think today we can reflect and say, well, that wasn't quite fair considering the situation, but Hamlet is obviously in an intense moment of his life.
Oh, a couple of things about the play. It's Shakespeare's longest play. I think the character of Hamlet himself has something like 5,000 lines or 4,000 something, so just like enormous. The original version would last something like 5 hours. Wonder what, how people could stand such a long play in those times. And it's the most reviewed played by critics ever, and it's also so iconic in a way that it's the arrival point, or the biggest challenge for many famous actors, Mel Gibson, Richard Burton, and so on and so forth. Even in Italy, great actor, Gassman, actually, did a version of Hamlet himself, and the famous monologue, To Be or Not to Be, is probably the most famous monologue of all times. And also we got some objects which are very important in the play, and one of them is actually there was a big discussion when we wrote the play whether to get rid of some of the props in a way, but the one we absolutely could not get rid of was the skull. And the skull pretty much appears in all the iconography of Hamlet. And why is that? I mean, if you don't know anything about the play, why do you think it's so important?
Well, there's a big misconception, which is that of course a lot of people who maybe have never read the play or don't know much about it think that it's the most famous image. It should be paired with the most famous lines. Everyone knows the skull. Everyone knows to be or not to be, but they're in completely
separate
separate parts
places in the
of
play.
the play.
Yeah.
Well, so Hamlet is speaking. The skull is the skull of his father's jester. So this would have been a kind of, if you like, babysitter, nanny for him growing up, someone who was always around and who would have been very dear to his heart. He talks about how wonderful it was to play with him as a young boy. And now he sees his skull and it disgusts him, but it provokes also pity and even love. But it's also the image itself is repellent. So, of course, it's a very philosophical play, and this is a moment where comedy and tragedy are mixing very freely. Just before this moment, there is this comic scene with the gravedigger. They're throwing skulls about, and and then this sort of lucidity of I know this person. It makes him think about death and about his own life and about what he's about to do, which is go on with his plan to kill Claudius.
All right,
So.
and we're 41 minutes into the stream. We still have 4 or 5 minutes. It's a complex play, of course, and there's a story within the story because there's another play played inside the play, which it really is a complex play in a way, and so sometimes if you don't know the story that well, it's also difficult to kind of follow the story if you are watching an abridged version. I was in Avignon, for example. Avignon is a big theater festival that takes place in France, and I saw a version of Hamlet played by one actor, which was great, by the way, but if you didn't know the story, it was just like impossible to follow. So it's just one of those things. Before we conclude, you're involved in another play by William Shakespeare,
Yep.
which is, you want to speak about it?
Sure. I just recently finished a run with Richard III, which, by the way, if you have any
just a second, I'm just thanking somebody who's watching us live. Anna Maria, thanks to you.
Yes,
thank you.
Anna
Sorry,
Maria.
carry on.
So if you have any temerity about the complexity of Hamlet, you can just leave that at the door before you see Richard III, because it's a nightmare. I mean, there's a wonderful documentary made by Al Pacino called Looking for Richard, where he explains, I think, beautifully and in a masterful way the insane level of complexity that there is in Richard III. And once again, we're kind of up against something that maybe for the audience of the Elizabethan theater would have been something totally different. For one, Richard III is part of a series of histories. So imagine, you jump into season 5 of some show and you expect to understand everything. It's going to be very difficult. But the other thing is that, and this is, let's say, a theory, but Richard III, it seems to be not exactly a portrayal of the historical figure Richard III, but more a very thinly veiled satire of who would have been a current political figure of Shakespeare's day that probably most audience members would have immediately recognized because he had this kind of hump, whereas the historical Richard III had more like a scoliosis. Anyway, the point being that something, whether it is as complex as Richard III or Hamlet, which is, let's say, maybe the story is less complex, but the ideas and the emotions are perhaps even more complex, I would say. You have to open it. And what happens for me as a native speaker when I see a really well done version of Shakespeare, the first 2-3 minutes, I'm hit with this old English and it's very difficult. And if I just relax and settle into it, my ears adjust and suddenly it's like they're speaking my language today, to the point where when I exit the theater, there's a kind of, I have to switch back to modern English. Like there's something in my brain which is wants to speak in that old way. So, you know, it's something kind of mystical, but it is our inheritance. It's something that I think it's really beautiful to make it still live today. Something that.
All right. So we're about to close. Just a couple of things. It's a first live stream. Hey, maybe, and it's we decided to start with a heavy subject, but at the same time, I hope we just made it lighter. That is Hamlet. You mentioned Looking for Richard, which is a documentary about Al Pacino, and it's certainly something. If I were a teacher, I would show my students, for example, because it really tells so much about Shakespeare in a very light manner. It's the same goal we set ourselves with our show, Hamlet, Prince of Sweden. That is to say, not to explain the whole story, but really to leave the audience wanting to learn more about the play, really, and also finding, you know, the reasons why they should explore the play even further. So yeah, so that's the objective, really, to be didactic in a way, but at the same time in a very light manner. And before we end, just for everybody watching, just reminding that you can also find, and I'm going to show you something, Nike, real fast. You can find some of our plays on Amazon as well. This is Virginie, for example. You're going to find Hamlet, Prince of Sweden pretty soon. Yeah, that's something I do. I always publish my play on Amazon. Here's Brexit. That's another play. You know, we speak about Avignon. We also write theater guides, and this is a theater guide about the Avignon Theater Festival. So yeah, I must say, I'm using the word "I" here because I've written everything myself. I'm kind of an obsessive compulsive writer and stuff like that. And in the future, let's see if we can work out this other play about Romeo and Juliet set in Shanghai. That would be a real challenge. Anna Maria, no problem. We finished as well. Have a nice day. And Nike, thank you very much. Who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe it'd be great to do another live stream about another play you're involved with, which is Caligula, and even Mr. Jackpot. If anybody's watching this and maybe they are in Milan or so on, I think you're going to do something in the next few days. You said something tomorrow.
Yeah, on the day of Liberation, we're doing a show with the same company that did Richard III. That is going to take place in the World War II bunker underneath Piazza Grandi, and it's a series of war monologues. So I'll be recounting my experience when I was 11 years old of the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center. And so, yeah, that will be in the evening at Piazza Grandi. So the company is La Dual Band, if you want to come and see us on Thursday in Milan.
Okay, now stay with us, Nike, as we're gonna finish the stream. If you want to get in touch, let me remind you, you can write at info.tomcorradini.at or WhatsApp at this number, +39 393 80 30 864. And if you like this video, please subscribe and like, especially subscribe. And we're just starting with this channel. What is going to happen in the future as we're touring with our shows? We're going to add some more content, very light content. So, you know, even, you know, where we eat during our tours, there's something in Italian which is called fame dell'artista, which is translated would be artist's hunger. And, you know, one thing I'm looking forward to whenever I'm touring is eating all these restaurants around Italy, France, or whatsoever, and also content from theater festivals. Maybe I'm going to produce some content myself on the backstage, what happens during a theater play. So it's going to be very niche, but I hope somebody's going to be interested out there. And having said that, Nike Redding, thank you very much. Stay here with me. And for everybody, enjoy life, enjoy theater. Let's make it happen. Ciao.